Hi all. We'll be starting this webinar in about 1 minute, or 30 seconds to 1 minute. Just give a little longer for people to join. So as soon as we get to that time, give it another 30 seconds. We'll kick off. So hello and welcome to this Veeam webinar. My name's Alex Fraser. I'm a senior systems engineer here at Veeam. Today we're going to be looking at disaster recovery. So we're going to be starting with the basic 3-2-1 capabilities and moving up to more advanced disaster recovery and how to address those key challenges and those 5 key headaches we see when speaking to our customers today. Before we get into details, and for the benefit of anyone who's new to Veeam, it's probably best to start with a quick overview. What I would say in terms of a bit of housekeeping, if we can leave any questions, there is a questions area of this webinar that if you want to pose any questions, if we could leave them to the end of the presentation, then it gives us a chance to see them, those questions as they are put in. So if you just leave them to the end, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So who are Veeam? Well, we're a global software company founded in 2006. Veeam was very much born out of virtualization. So our product origins were initially focused on backup for VMware, virtual infrastructure in the early days, but have since added support for multiple hypervisors, physical machines, enterprise applications, and cloud workloads. If we look at the numbers, Veeam exceeded 1 billion in bookings in 2019, and our annual recurring revenue has increased 26% year on year. Today, we have more than 365,000 customers worldwide, over 400 employees, and offices in more than 30 countries. We also have a great NPS score, Net Promoter Score of 75, showing that our customers' satisfaction levels are high. And you can see there at the bottom of the screen that that is 3 times higher than the industry average. Veeam is the #1 choice, depending on which report you look at. So we continue to be the leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant year after year. Ovum selected Veeam as one of the clear leaders for data protection solutions. IDC named Veeam as #1 in market share growth for data protection. And Veeam received one of the highest customer choice ratings in Gartner's peer review, and Forrester showcases Veeam as a leader in data resiliency solutions. So why Veeam? Well, simply put, it's simple. Our single platform brings together all of your data in one place so you can put that data to work. Its scalable architecture grows as you do, no hardware or software limitations. It's flexible. We help you back up and manage your data from anywhere at any time. Being software defined and hardware agnostic gives you the choice to run Veeam software however you see fit. And data is 100% portable across any system, physical, virtual, or cloud. It's also reliable. It just works. Tagline we've had for a number of years. Our backup and data management solutions evolve with you at the budget you have, and we provide 100% guaranteed verification, giving you that peace of mind that when you come to recover your data, it's going to be valid. Veeam is also a leader in cloud data management, meaning that data is available across the business, centrally managed and controlled, and located where it delivers the most value for the organization. We understand that with a multi-cloud approach, our customers today want more from their platforms. And with Veeam, they can surpass that legacy approach to data protection by providing the next steps beyond just backup. So this enables our customers to achieve data availability, governance, orchestration, visibility, and mobility across their data centers at the edge and in the cloud. So how do we achieve this? Well, if we take a look at the platform, at the core to Veeam is backup and replication. This helps our customers protect, test, and recover their virtual, physical, and cloud workloads. And this will be the starting point for today's webinar around disaster recovery. Alongside this, we have backup for Office 365. So the ability to protect that SaaS data that may no longer live on site, but still needs to be protected. For the second part of this webinar, we're going to be looking at the advanced capabilities available in Veeam Availability Orchestrator. So this provides enterprise level disaster recovery for our VMware customers. And finally, but not part of today's session, Veeam One. This provides monitoring analytics for complete visibility across your environment. And for customers who want to benefit from both backup and replication and monitoring in Veeam One, you can get the Veeam Availability Suite, which you can think of as a bundle of the two with a single license. If we expand out the platform, you can see here that we support multiple cloud platforms for both managed and public, including Office 365 to protect email, OneDrive, and SharePoint data, 3 hypervisors, VMware, Hyper-V, and AHV, physical workloads, including Windows, Linux, Oracle, AIX. It also includes enterprise plugins for Oracle RMAN and SAP HANA. We have universal APIs, so we can integrate with many of our alliance partner storage. So both from a primary perspective, allowing Veeam to leverage the snapshot and replication technology underpinning the VMware virtual estate and allowing us to manage the recoveries from those snapshots. Or secondary, allowing backups to be efficiently stored on deduplicated storage devices, as well as the other storage devices that we support for backup. We can also leverage on-premises or object storage in the cloud for that offsite or long-term data retention. So that's an overview of Veeam. If you're new to Veeam, let's look at the capabilities and backup and recovery. What we're going to do is we're going to quickly start off with just identifying some components here that you need to be aware of and understanding what they are. So there are 3 mandatory components with Veeam. First is the Veeam backup and replication server. So this is the server you're going to log on to manage your backup or replication jobs. The proxy role, so this is the data mover responsible for inline dedupe and compression and sending that data to a disk target or to a secondary site for disaster recovery. And then the disk repository, which stores the files, the backup files and or metadata for replication jobs. And that can be directly attached storage, so block storage behind a Windows or Linux server. It could be a NAS device, it could be a dedupe appliance. Now, in a small environment, all 3 of these components may exist on a single server. But for larger customers who need to scale, you can scale out both proxies and repositories, and there's no real limit on the number of proxies or repositories you can deploy within your environment, depending on how much you need to scale. So that's just some components of Veeam that we need to be aware of before we go into the different types of disaster recovery. So at Veeam, we very much talk about the 3-2-1 rule. If you've not come across this before, this is an industry best practice. It really says if you want to ensure your ability to recover, then you need 3 copies of the data. So your first copy is your production copy. And as I mentioned, for VMware customers, we also have snapshots on the array that we can recover from potentially. Or for other hypervisors and physical workloads, the array itself might be creating snapshots under its own schedule. So you may have the ability to recover data there. The second copy is your primary backup copy. Quite often with Veeam, it will be stored on disk, something close to the production system, so you get quick recovery, and we'll go into the different levels of recovery that are available. And then traditionally, a third copy offsite, so a secondary backup copy on different media. Traditionally, tape always been a good method for getting that data offsite, protected, air-gapped against ransomware, etc. For that long-term retention. But with Veeam, you can also currently move that older data out to object storage in the cloud or on premises if you had a secondary location, as well as in our next version, version 10, you'll be able to have a complete copy of this backup sat in the cloud if you don't have your own secondary location. All this provides the ability to perform granular VM recovery or bare metal recovery of your physical workloads. And that also includes recovering those physical workloads back to a hypervisor if you need to get them back up and running quickly and you can't afford the bare metal recovery back to physical. Guest file recovery from within the virtual machine or physical machine itself, down to granular application of the application. So for some customers, having an offsite copy and just the ability to recover those files or those applications is enough for them. Maybe they don't have any aggressive RPO or RTO times. They don't need to get anything up and running super fast. They just need the ability to recover. So I class that as the basic disaster recovery, if you will. So we've got granular recovery from the hypervisor level. So configuration files such as a VMX file in VMware as an example that may have got corrupted. The virtual machine data is valid, but the server won't boot for any reason. So we can recover at the hypervisor level. We can recover files at the OS level of the VM or the physical workloads, but we can also recover natively from these applications used here. So Exchange, SharePoint, Active Directory, SQL, and Oracle. No additional license required. We simply do a bare metal recovery of those physical or virtual workloads and then natively give you that granular recovery out of the box. For those customers who may not have an aggressive RTO, they don't need to recover quickly, but there may be that one key application they've got to stand up quickly before they can start to recover anything else. Or maybe they've just got that key application that's gone offline and they need to get it back up and running quickly. We have our instant recovery feature. So Veeam pioneered this with our vPower technology, and it's really the ability to take the backup that you may have, or even a storage snapshot if you're a VMware customer, and present that up to the hypervisor so we can power up and register the VM directly from the backup or from the storage snapshot without any requirement to perform a recovery operation at this point. We've simply got that machine back up and running, validated it's a good restore point that we want to keep or restore, and then we do a background migration. Think of it like a storage remotion in VMware terms. Let's migrate that VM back to production while it's in use and online by users. We also have, through our cloud mobility, the option to recover anything that you may have protected, both physical and virtual, on premises, and push it into a public cloud platform such as AWS, Azure, or Azure Stack. So this might be a method of migration. You might be pushing and putting workloads in that platform. You might be using it for test and dev, and you want to be able to leverage that cloud, public cloud, as opposed to having your own secondary site. And if you've got your backup data already in that that object storage, it might be that your disaster recovery requirement is just the ability to recover that data into that cloud platform if you needed to. So again, just adding on the different levels of recovery that our customers look to use. And then most importantly, I guess with Veeam, if you did decide to recover any of those workloads into that public space, then you also have the ability with Veeam to bring those back to on-premises for any reason. There's sometimes a scenario where an application has gone into that public cloud, and through the way in which that application works, it might actually be more efficient and cost effective to have that on premises as opposed to in the cloud in terms of things like egress charges. If you do have a secondary site, so we're kind of building up the stack here of different disaster recovery scenarios, then it might be that you have a secondary location where you want to send a backup copy. So I always use the example here that at the primary site, we might hold a short-term retention. The default is 2 weeks when you create a backup job with Veeam. But then we're going to send a secondary copy of that data, of all of the data, or just a selection of the data, to a repository in another site. And this provides the ability for quick recoveries for disaster recovery. Okay, you might not have the requirement to fully register them and power them up at a moment's notice, but you still want the ability to recover at that secondary site. And maybe you have a hypervisor sat there that you can recover to. So you could use instant recovery, full VM recovery, and scan for antivirus and such as you're doing those recovery operations. And the ability from that longer term retention, let's say that this is 14 days, maybe this is 1 month or 2 months of disk recovery, and then we'll any long-term retention can go off to tape or cloud from this secondary copy. So just really making sure that you have multiple copies of that data to recover from, but in this scenario you do have your own secondary site. Now, if we go at the next level up, it might be that some customers, well, they don't want to have to go through any kind of recovery operation in the event of a disaster. They want the ability to just bring up their systems at that secondary site. So with Veeam replication, what we can do, and you get backup and replication under the same license, so it's not an additional license, so you can back up the same machine as well as replicate it. What we can do is, for those machines that have aggressive RPOs, they need to be updated regularly from production down to, say, every 15 minutes for that key application. We can replicate directly from production, or for those servers that maybe don't require that level of RPO, if we've already got a backup copy sent to that secondary site, we can register these from a backup. And what we do is we fully restore those virtual machines onto the hypervisor at the DR site, onto the DR storage. Again, if you've got ESX, VMware, and you've got a storage that we integrate with, it might be that we're leveraging the replication technology of that array to bring these machines up. But ultimately, they're fully restored VMs sat at the disaster recovery site, and they have hypervisor rollback points, snapshots, if you will, that we can roll back to if the latest one is invalid for any reason. So this means that you can define failover plans. How am I going to bring these servers up, in what order, and what time interval in between? So quite simplistic in its approach, but gives you the ability to just hit that button or plan a migration and power those servers up in the order that you've defined. As you'll see when we move on to Orchestrator, we will take that to a higher level with Orchestrator. Now, rather than that data just sat there at that secondary site, only really being used in the event of a disaster, why not also automate your disaster recovery testing and also use it as a development, test and dev environment? So with our Veeam Data Labs, what we have the ability to do is manually or schedule the powering up of those machines. So quite often when vendors talk about verification of data, it's quite often, can I read data off a disk? Can I read data off a tape? That doesn't really tell you whether the operating system's valid, whether the application's been backed up in a consistent manner, and whether your data is actually recoverable. Right? Quite often customers don't really know that there's a problem until they come to recover it. And if they could use data labs and test that data, then it really gives them peace of mind that doing regular testing and that data is valid. So either you schedule that to happen on a weekend or you leave it online and you use it for patch testing. You know, I need to upgrade an application. I don't really want to do it in production because if I hit an issue, then I could take down that application. So I'll simulate my production environment in this isolated network, in this isolated lab. I'll do my patch upgrade. I'll document the procedure. And at the end of that, I'll shut it down. And then knowing that when I go to do it in production, I'm not going to define the problems that I might hit along the way. Or if it's an automated DR test job, once we've done this automated powering up and testing, just like a backup job, it would happen on a weekend, we'll shut that down, power it off, and send you an email that just says, yeah, it was successful, here's some warnings or failures that you need to investigate. So it gives you that peace of mind that we are continually automating that DR test for you. You can also do this with backups, so what we call sure backups. So if you want to mount backups for scanning antivirus on them, checking for all the things I've just talked about, as well as consistency checks of the data, you can do that on a backup as well. And you can also do this testing from a storage snapshot on your primary VMware array or secondary array. If you are doing this level of replication, then best practice would state you'd have this backup and replication server on the secondary site, because ultimately if you're trying to protect against this primary site going offline for any reason, you don't want to have to recover this box first. You want to be able to just initiate and click the green button, as I would always say. You want to just power up those VMs and not waste any time. So this is, I guess, the more advanced disaster recovery capabilities available in backup and replication. But let's move on to Orchestrator, and let's have a look at how this enhances that capability. So Veeam Availability Orchestrator is available for our VMware customers today, and there are three key challenges with disaster recovery. The first one is documentation. It's often quite hard to get your documentation in order. There might be a manual requirement there, might be one person that updates that documentation, and quite often as soon as that document is completed, it's almost out of date because something's changed in the environment. So it's very hard to keep on top of documentation. Without the Veeam Data Labs that I talked about, it's quite often hard to test. I used to work with a customer that didn't have this capability, so they would quite often park a data center on wheels in their car park and spend a week performing recovery operations to prove their data was valid. And you can imagine the cost and time involved with that approach. So if they could have automated their DR testing and planned what they were going to do, then it would have saved a lot of time and money. And if you can't do any of this, it pretty much, how do you know your data is reliable? You need to be sure that when you fail over to that secondary copy, that your data is going to be valid. It's super important that we know that the business is going to continue as usual. But if we can go to the headaches that we see when we speak to customers, building a plan that is application centric and considers all the dependencies is an issue. In Veeam backup and replication, as I mentioned, you can create a simplistic failover plan, but there's no real awareness of the application. We're powering up one server, waiting a couple of minutes, powering up the next server. What if we could actually have an understanding of the application and not waste time in terms of our power up procedure? That's the first headache that we see. Second is whenever we come to perform a disaster recovery, the right people might not be available. So can we empower additional people that may not have created the plans but have the ability to initiate a failover if everything goes wrong at the primary site? Constantly validating the recoverability. Quite often, it's continually changing. New applications are being added into the disaster recovery plan on a regular basis. So how do we keep on top of that? And how do we maintain an up-to-date recovery plan? We need to be able to do regular testing. We need to know where the issues are so we can fix them quickly and efficiently. Getting budget for the tools to be successful before, during, and after an outage is also a problem. If you can report back to the business where you're exposed, where the problems lie, then you can obviously help to get more budget to make sure that you can keep on top of your disaster recovery plan and make sure it'll be successful. So Veeam Orchestrator enhances the capabilities of backup and replication and gives you the peace of mind that you'll have dynamic documentation, fully customizable, providing an audit trail. We'll automate the DR testing for you, but you can also run them manually when you're making changes to those plans. And all of this will be reliable recovery, verified and optimized, so you can always be sure and prove back to the business that if we were to fail over tomorrow, that the business will operate as usual. So how do we do this? Well, under the hood is actually Veeam backup and replication that is still replicating those VMs and creating those replica VMs at the secondary site. Maybe you also want to test your recovery from backup. How long is it going to take us if we were to recover from backup to do those initial instant recoveries and then recover the data thereafter. So Orchestrator would be an additional layer that would sit above backup and replication and provides a web-based portal where users can define failover plans for Veeam replicas or define their recovery from backup. So you can think of it as a collaborative portal that people can go into. They don't get any visibility or understanding the underlying infrastructure, so you can give them access to just their application or just the things they need to work on for their application to come online. And we do the same automated data labs testing. The difference here is that through advanced PowerShell scripting in our own application scripts, if that first server you're going to power on in the example for this webinar is your domain controller, rather than waiting 2 minutes before we power up the next server, well, as soon as the domain's online and responding, let's move on to the next server. Let's not waste any time. Let's get that RTO, that recovery time objective, down to the lowest we can possibly get it. And also, if somebody wants to add a new application into that recovery plan, what impact's that going to have on our RTO? Sorry, if business expects an hour and we're currently at 58 minutes, and we add a new application in, we can go back to the business and say, well, we can do that, but appreciate that you are now going over that hour RTO, so we're going to need to work on how we reduce that plan down, or whether we change our RTO requirements. And again, test and dev, people can come into this Orchestrator web-based UI, get direct access to these isolated VMs without any understanding of the underlying backup and replication infrastructure, do their patch testing, spin up their environment every Monday morning for testing. Let's make use of that backup or that replicated data that's ordinarily just sat there and used for recovery operations. Let's leverage that so that we can get more out of our storage and our disaster recovery plans. And then at the end, power that off, but this time send a more detailed report. So at the end of this session, I'll show you the reporting element and the reports, an example of the reports you get. Again, going to a much higher level in terms of reporting back, what is our exact RTO times? Where are we wasting time? And you'll see that at the end of this session. So just kind of recap, orchestration plans. Let's plan the failover procedure for mission critical applications. And I'm going to come on to it in a moment, but Orchestrator doesn't need to be licensed for everything, just those mission critical or business critical applications that need this level of planning. Test failover plans in an isolated environment away from production. right? So let's keep it isolated. Let's not put that any kind of load onto the production systems. We can still automate the DR testing without actually having to perform a failover. Let's ensure the required recovery point objectives, RPOs and RTOs, are being achieved. And then let's fully document that procedure and update that documentation every time that we test that plan automatically, as opposed to somebody manually doing it within the organization. Use cases, why would you want this? Well, firstly, disaster recovery, business continuity. You want to react to something happening at one of your sites and you want to fail over, so full disaster recovery. Or maybe you want to act on the ability to plan a migration between data centers. So within a plan, you can also define shutting down the source VMs, resyncing the changes, or updating the backups or replicas, and then bringing those servers up at the secondary site. So it might be that it's not just disaster recovery. You might want to flip between data centers or plan a migration. Well, why would you use data labs? Well, you want an isolated, non-destructive virtual environment, fully fenced off for regular testing without impact on production. So you want to simulate that production in a secondary environment. You want to perform full application verification, including custom scripts, and generate detailed reporting. So there's a number of reasons, as you'll see in a moment, why you might use this technology. And then all of the changes are discarded at the end of your testing phase, so that you've had the ability to document whatever you needed to do. So when you come to do in production, you know you've fully tested on real life data. Use cases for that would be patch and upgrade testing, as I've mentioned, maybe security audits, or you want to run some analytics and you don't want to put that load onto the production systems. So let's just use a copy instead. So to give you an example what this looks like in the console. So when you log into the Veeam Availability Orchestrator console, you have orchestration plans you can define. And as you can see here, I've got this, for this purpose of this webinar, I've got an Exchange plan. So I've got an Active Directory server and my Exchange server that I want to test. I've defined my plan, so it's sat here. It's verified on a weekly basis automatically. So I've run a schedule, or I've attached a schedule to this plan to automate that DR testing for me. And if you look at the options when you right click on this plan, this is the big green button that I would always refer to. In the event of a disaster, if I have the required permissions, I can simply come into this web-based portal and I can kick off that failover plan and initiate my disaster recovery. You may not be the person that created this plan, but if you have the power, you may have the ability to initiate that failover, because that person that was working and defining that plan may not be available when that issue happens. You can also run this test lab. So let's say you made some changes, you've added some additional servers into this plan, you want to see the impact that has on the recovery time, etc. You can run that plan manually and see that kick off, which you'll see in the next couple of slides. And you can run the readiness check. The readiness check firstly checks that our replication jobs or what have you underneath are up to date and we're achieving our RPO, but it also does what I'd class as a pre-flight check. Are all the components in place for us to be able to achieve failover if we were to click the button tomorrow? So it's continually, this runs by default on a daily basis, so you get warnings to any issues within the environment that might stop that disaster recovery plan from working. And you can schedule this to happen, as I said, or you can define a data lab to power up, as well as you can schedule it in the lab calendar. So in this scenario, data lab would be my SQL developer needs access to his SQL cluster and I want to create a copy or present a copy for him to work on. I can spin up a data lab and schedule that to happen on a regular time during the week. When you define the plan, you can say, am I going to power these servers up in sequence, or am I going to do them simultaneously? So maybe the first plan that you would initiate, it has application dependencies. They need to come up in a certain order. Maybe after that, you could then have a plan that powers up a number of servers simultaneously because those key mission critical applications are online. So in my case here, there is an Active Directory server, and that's the first server that's going to initiate the steps. It's going to power up the VM. It's going to check that it's got a tools heartbeat in VMware. It's going to check that it's on the network and it's responding. And then we're going to do some scripting against the application to make sure that that is responding and online. And as soon as we've run down through those steps, we're then going to move on to the secondary server. So if you relate this to what we do in backup and replication, with backup and replication, with a failover plan, we're waiting X number of minutes. There's no deeper understanding of the application. So here, if this takes 30 seconds to get through these steps, well, let's move on. We've just saved ourselves 1.5 minutes in that scenario. And obviously, if you're bringing up a number of different servers, then you can really define the best RTO possible. What steps can you apply? Well, we have our own default scripts for certain applications. Do we want to check a mailbox is online, a SQL database is available, etc.? But you can also define your own custom scripts, your own custom PowerShell scripts if you want to go a bit deeper into an application. Maybe we don't have anything default that works, so you can create your own steps for individual servers. And you simply add them into the order in which you're going to process during a test or a disaster recovery. So this is a view of a disaster recovery plan doing a test. And you can see we're running processing this server first. We're halfway down through the steps where we powered up the VM. We know it's got a heartbeat tools response. We know we're now checking if it's on the network. And you can see on the right hand side here, we have all the sub steps, if you will, the step details. Is there anything here that's taking time, or retrying too many times? Is there something we can investigate to see if we can get a deeper understanding of why we might be wasting time during a recovery? And you can obviously define these steps, and when you kick it off, you can see it's 33% through its testing phase. So really, when looking at Orchestrator, it's about thinking about applications. What are application dependencies? This may not be required for everyone. As I mentioned, some people just need the ability to recover files or applications. They don't have any aggressive RPO or RTOs, but ultimately they still need the ability to recover. Whereas Orchestrator is around, I need to get my business back up and running as quickly as possible, those mission critical applications that we rely on. So it's thinking about application dependencies and what is the cascading effect of not having those certain mission critical applications online. So in terms of, say, licensing, Orchestrator is licensed on a per VM basis above backup and replication. So it might be in this scenario that we have 300 VMs that are being protected through backup and replication, but only 150 of those machines need this level of planning. So I might have an Orchestrator license for 150. I have 50 VMs that are mission critical that are replicated or updated every 4 hours. So the first thing I need to do is get those machines up and running. Maybe I'm going to run them in sequence because I need to get their dependencies and I need to get certain things online first. Once they're online, I'm then going to get these other business critical applications online. Maybe I'll run them in sequence because all the dependent applications are online. And then thereafter, everything else can be recovered from a backup, or there's no defined RTO here. We just need to get it back up and running at some point. But these are the main applications we need to get online first. So you would maybe have a 300 license or a license to protect 300 machines under backup and replication, but only 150 for this level of orchestration. And when you come to the end of the webinar here, there are three documents you can run. The first is the readiness check. So this is on by default, runs on a daily basis. Are all the components in place? We're not actually doing anything here other than just checking components, making sure that if we were to fail over, it's going to work. There's nothing that's going to catch us out. We then have the test execution report. Every time an automated DR test is run, or you run a test manually because you've made a change, we're going to send out new updated documentation that's going to show all the steps that were taken. So you can obviously review those or have a look at whether you're achieving your required RPO or RTOs, which we will report on in that report. And then we have the execution report, pretty much the same thing, but if we've actually performed a disaster recovery failover or we planned a data center migration, what actually happened, all the steps that actually were taking place. So if there was something that went wrong, which there shouldn't be, we can still investigate that and have a detailed understanding of what happened. So as an example of the report, you can create as many reports as you like. It's fully customizable. You can attach your own logo. You can some elements of this are automatically updated by the system. So you can see the Exchange DR plan is the name that I gave that orchestration plan. But you can fully customize this down to you can see it's a full document that gets populated. So it's not just an email that gives you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And here you can see that we can fully put in this document where the site contacts are, who do we need to contact if we're failing over to this site, what are the required RTO and RPO times that we've defined or the business is defined as part of this application group. So it's really a detailed document, even going down to information around the source virtual machine that we've protected and the disaster recovery machine that we've created at that secondary site, all the steps that were taken to bring that secondary copy online. What was the time for all of these? You can see that the longest time was waiting for that virtual machine to power on, but thereafter these application tests have taken less than 30 seconds to achieve, so we can go down through this list and not waste any time. And then if you really want to go into the advanced, you can go down to all the things that happened within each step. Was there a number of retries waiting for a network response? Maybe we could have changed that or made some changes to just get that happen first time. And all of this just gives you a detailed documentation that you can run. For us, this documentation is a really great thing for our customers that you don't necessarily get with any other disaster recovery solution. So it's a very useful tool. So just as an overview of Orchestrator, obviously we mentioned backup and replication. There's many different levels of disaster recovery depending on your requirements. But to kind of cover off Orchestrator, it is plan, test, and automate disaster recovery procedure. Use data labs to provide a test environment that mirrors production for that test and development space you need. Let's leverage that for more than just DR or the ad hoc recovery. And then let's automate that generation of DR documentation and allow you to be on top of that. So that's the end of today's webinar. Happy to take any questions that you may want to pose. So, but also just wanted to say we have our Veeam on virtual, so you can take a note of that web link there. That web link takes you straight to our online virtual Veeam on virtual, so you can deep dive into some of the different sessions. So I would encourage you, if you want to see some of the new things that are coming in version 10 or just want to get a better understanding of the overall platform, please jump on and have a look at our Veeam on virtual online. Okay, so yeah, there is a question. So we have a question on, do we need any extra licenses? So as I mentioned, you would license the Veeam backup and replication environment. And for that, you would have licenses to protect and back up those virtual machines. It might be that you're buying a perpetual socket license to protect your virtual estate, or you might be using our universal licensing to protect those virtual machines or physical workloads, etc., cloud workloads. If you want the advanced orchestration layer, then on top of that Enterprise Plus license that you would have to back up and protect those machines, you would add that additional orchestrator license on a per VM basis, and that will allow you to then have a plan for those mission critical applications. I'm just trying to see the remaining questions. There is an issue, someone's had an issue with audio, but I don't think I can help with that. Hopefully most people can hear the audio. Are the backups covered? Europe. So yeah, backups are covered with backup and replication, Orchestrator. So with backup and replication, as I mentioned, just to recap, you get both licenses for protecting the virtual or physical workloads through backup operations, as well as the ability to replicate those virtual machines for disaster recovery. And obviously backups, if you wish, if you've backed up a physical workload that you've also copied, you have the ability to either do a bare metal recovery back to physical hardware, or you have the ability to convert it and stand it up as a virtual machine and get it up and running as a VM. That's all covered under a license. So you choose your whether you want to go perpetual or socket licensing, sorry, perpetual or subscription licensing, and then you would get a level of functionality. So we don't care necessarily how many VMs you're protecting, how many applications you've got, how much data. We're not licensing based on front-end capacity. We don't care how much data you're protecting or how many copies of that data you want to create. None of that, that's all covered under Veeam. If you've got 100 SQL databases, you're not licensing on a per SQL database perspective. So keep that in mind. All those applications are covered as long as we've done that image level protection. So that's all the questions I can see for now. So really appreciate the time that you've taken out to join this session. I see some people may have had some audio issues, so hopefully they can watch this another time. But thanks again, appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.